What if the rulers who shaped history met their ends in ways shrouded in mystery? Imagine uncovering stories where kings and emperors, once powerful and untouchable, succumbed to fates so puzzling they have baffled historians for centuries. From ancient pharaohs to medieval monarchs, the deaths of these rulers were not just endings but beginnings of debates that still echo today. Conspiracy theories swirl around these enigmatic events, questioning whether these leaders fell to natural causes or were victims of betrayal, poison, or even curses. As we venture into the shadows of the past, prepare to unravel the secrets behind 25 of the most mysterious deaths in history. What really happened to these ancient kings, and why does it still matter today? Keep watching to piece together the clues and uncover the truth hidden in the annals of time. As we step into the world of ancient Egypt, the land of pyramids and pharaohs, we encounter two rulers whose deaths remain as intriguing as the treasures buried with them. First, let us unravel the mystery surrounding Tutankhamun, the boy king whose life was cut tragically short. His untimely death at such a young age has sparked endless debates. Was it a fatal injury sustained during a chariot race, as some researchers suggest, or could it have been murder orchestrated by someone within his inner circle? Modern forensic studies of his mummy have revealed a fractured leg and signs of malaria, hinting at a life filled with suffering. Yet no definitive answer exists, leaving us to ponder the circumstances of his demise. Shifting our focus to another enigmatic ruler, Ramses III, we uncover a tale filled with betrayal and intrigue. His death is famously tied to what historians call the harem conspiracy, a plot so elaborate it reads like a script from a historical drama. Ancient texts suggest that members of his own household, including some of his wives and officials, conspired to assassinate him using poison. Evidence from his mummy shows a deep wound across his throat, possibly inflicted during the attempted coup. What makes this story even more fascinating is the forensic analysis of the conspirators' trial records, which reveal the intricate web of deceit and ambition behind the plot. These two pharaohs, separated by centuries, leave behind mysteries that continue to captivate us, offering a glimpse into the dangers of power and the fragility of life in ancient times. Now, let us journey forward to another legendary figure whose disappearance has puzzled historians for generations. Now, as we leave behind the golden sands of Egypt, we venture into the heart of an empire that once stretched across Mesopotamia, ruled by a man whose name echoes through history as one of its earliest conquerors. Sargon of Akkad, a king who rose from humble beginnings to forge the first known empire, left behind a legacy as imposing as the walls of his capital city. Yet his life story ends not with triumph but with an enigma. What happened to Sargon after his reign? Legends swirl around his final days, the most haunting of which claims he was swallowed by the sea during a violent storm. This dramatic tale of nature's fury overtaking even the mightiest ruler may seem like the stuff of myth, but it raises intriguing questions. Could this story have been a way for ancient Mesopotamians to make sense of his sudden absence? Or was it a reflection of their belief in the wrath of the gods, punishing those who dared to rise too high? What we do know is that no definitive archaeological evidence has been found to confirm how Sargon truly met his end. His tomb, like his fate, remains elusive, a void that continues to baffle historians. What makes Sargon's disappearance so compelling is not just the lack of answers, but how it shaped the myths and fears of the people who followed him. The idea of a ruler vanishing without a trace would have been both terrifying and fascinating, perhaps inspiring stories of divine retribution that became ingrained in Mesopotamian culture. As we reflect on this ancient mystery, it's worth considering how even the most powerful figures can fade into legend, their stories reshaped by time and imagination. With that lingering thought, let us now turn to another corner of the ancient world, where the deaths of two Persian kings reveal just how dangerous the throne could be. As we journey into the ancient heart of Persia, a land where power and peril walked hand in hand, we encounter two kings whose deaths are as dramatic as the empire they ruled. First, let us unravel the fate of Darius III, the last ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, whose life ended not on the battlefield but in the shadows of betrayal. Following his defeat at the hands of Alexander of Macedon, Darius fled, desperate to rally his forces. Yet his own subjects turned against him, and conflicting accounts suggest he was either executed by his own nobles or left to die in chains. Ancient texts like those penned by the historian Herodotus paint a vivid picture of a man caught between the ambitions of conquerors and the treachery of those closest to him. What drove his assassins to such extremes? Was it fear of Alexander's wrath or a bid to claim power themselves? The answers remain shrouded in the mists of time. Turning to Cambyses II, we find a ruler whose story reads like a cautionary tale. Known for his military campaigns and volatile temper, Cambyses met his end in a manner as peculiar as his life. According to legend, he accidentally wounded himself while mounting his horse, a seemingly minor mishap that led to his untimely death. But whispers of divine retribution soon followed, as many believed the gods had punished him for his desecration of sacred sites in Egypt. Whether his demise was truly an act of celestial justice or simply the grim result of a tragic accident, the tale of Cambyses serves as a stark reminder of how fragile even the strongest of kings could be. These stories of Darius and Cambyses not only highlight the dangers of power in ancient Persia, but also reveal the fine line between mortal error and mythical fate. With these haunting echoes of the past, we now prepare to explore the death of a ruler whose conquests knew no bounds, yet whose own end remains a riddle wrapped in uncertainty. As we step away from the echoes of Persian courts and their tales of betrayal, we turn our gaze to a ruler whose name became synonymous with conquest itself. Alexander the Great, a figure whose ambitions stretched across continents, left behind not only an empire but also one of history's most perplexing mysteries, his sudden and unexplained death in Babylon. When Alexander fell ill during a banquet in 323 BCE, few could have imagined that his meteoric rise would culminate in such abrupt uncertainty. For days he lay incapacitated, his once indomitable body succumbing to an invisible force. Historians and scholars have debated endlessly about what truly claimed the life of this legendary king. Was it poison slipped into his wine by those fearful of his increasingly erratic rule? Or perhaps malaria or typhoid fever, both of which were rampant in the region and could explain his prolonged decline? Some even speculate that excessive drinking or an autoimmune disease played a role. Yet, with no definitive evidence remaining, his death remains a puzzle that continues to baffle experts to this day. What makes this mystery all the more intriguing is the chaos that unfolded in the wake of his passing. Without a clear successor named, Alexander's empire, spanning from Greece to India, was plunged into turmoil. His generals, once loyal comrades, became rivals vying for control, tearing the vast domain into smaller kingdoms through decades of conflict. This power struggle reshaped the ancient world, scattering Alexander's legacy into fragments governed by competing ambitions. The uncertainty surrounding his death mirrors the enigma of his life, a man who sought to conquer not just lands but the limits of human achievement. And yet, for all his victories, the final chapter of his story remains unwritten, lost somewhere between fact and legend. With this lingering question of how such a mighty ruler met his end, we now pivot to another corner of the ancient world, where the deaths of Roman emperors reveal yet more tales of intrigue and instability. Shifting our focus to the heart of ancient Rome, we encounter two emperors whose demises underscore the perilous nature of power in the Roman Empire. Caligula, a ruler whose name became synonymous with tyranny and excess, met an end as dramatic as his reign. His erratic behavior, marked by unpredictable outbursts and a growing detachment from reality, alienated not only the Senate but also the very guards sworn to protect him. In 41 CE, a conspiracy involving members of the Praetorian Guard and senators came to a head. Cornered in a palace corridor, Caligula was brutally assassinated, his life cut short by those who could no longer endure his volatile rule. This shocking event not only revealed the fragility of imperial authority, but also set the stage for further turmoil as the empire grappled with the question of succession. Turning to Commodus, another emperor whose life ended in violence, we find a ruler whose obsession with gladiatorial combat and self-deification alienated both the military and the Roman elite. Commodus saw himself as a god among men, often performing in the arena and styling himself as Hercules reborn. However, his theatrics and disregard for governance made him deeply unpopular. In 192 CE, a plot unfolded involving his mistress, a wrestling partner, and high-ranking officials. It was this wrestler, Narcissus, who ultimately strangled Commodus to death during a bath. This act of desperation highlighted the instability that plagued imperial Rome, where the line between ruler and spectacle blurred dangerously. Together, the deaths of Caligula and Commodus serve as stark reminders of the precariousness of power in a system rife with ambition, betrayal, and shifting allegiances. With these stories of Roman intrigue fresh in mind, we now journey to the misty fields of England, where the fate of King Harold II would be decided in one of history's most famous battles. Venturing now to the windswept plains of southern England, we arrive at the year 1066, a date etched into the annals of history as the backdrop for one of the most pivotal battles ever fought. The Battle of Hastings pitted the Anglo-Saxon King Harold II against the invading Norman forces led by William the Conqueror. For Harold, this clash would mark not only the culmination of his brief reign but also the end of an era for England itself. Yet, despite the battle's significance, the exact manner of Harold's demise remains shrouded in uncertainty. Most people are familiar with the iconic image from the Bayeux Tapestry, a massive embroidered chronicle of the events leading up to and including the battle. In one vivid panel, a figure believed to represent Harold is shown clutching an arrow embedded in his eye. This depiction has fueled the popular narrative that the king met his end in this dramatic and almost poetic fashion. However, historians have long debated whether this interpretation is accurate. Some argue that the figure with the arrow might not even be Harold, but rather another unfortunate warrior caught in the chaos of battle. Adding further complexity, medieval sources offer conflicting accounts of the king's final moments. Some chronicles describe Harold being cut down by Norman swords in a ferocious melee, his body all but unrecognizable by the time the fighting ceased. Others support the arrow theory, suggesting a swift and lethal strike that felled the king instantly. The discrepancies in these stories highlight the challenges of piecing together events from a time when written records were scarce and often influenced by political agendas. To unravel this enigma, we must also consider the motivations behind these accounts. For William and his Norman chroniclers, portraying Harold's death as swift and divinely ordained might have served to legitimize the conquest. On the other hand, the brutal melee version aligns with the chaotic reality of medieval warfare, where the line between heroism and carnage often blurred. Ultimately, the truth may never be fully known, but the debate itself underscores the enduring fascination with Harold's fate. With the mystery of Harold's death lingering like the mist over the battlefield, we now turn our attention to the glittering world of the Byzantine Empire, where intrigue and ambition wove a very different kind of tapestry, one that would claim the lives of two emperors in ways as dramatic as they were symbolic. As the mists of England's battlefields fade, we step into the opulent yet treacherous halls of the Byzantine Empire, where power was as much a weapon as a crown. Here, the stories of Justinian I and Leo V reveal a world where faith and ambition clashed with deadly consequences. These emperors, though separated by centuries, shared a fate tied to the intricate web of politics and religion that defined their era. Justinian I, perhaps one of history's most celebrated rulers, left behind a legacy of grand architecture, legal reform, and military conquest. Yet, the manner of his death remains as enigmatic as the empire he sought to rebuild. In the year 565, the Byzantine world was gripped by the plague of Justinian, a devastating pandemic that swept through the Mediterranean like a shadow of death. Some accounts suggest that Justinian himself succumbed to this horrific disease, his body overwhelmed by the same pestilence that claimed millions. Others, however, argue that his death was more mundane, the result of old age and the natural decline of a man who had ruled for decades. The lack of definitive evidence leaves us to ponder whether his end was marked by divine judgment or simply the fragility of human existence. Shifting forward to the 9th century, we encounter Leo V, a ruler whose reign was as turbulent as the times he lived in. Leo faced not only external threats but also internal divisions fueled by religious controversies. His attempts to navigate the iconoclast dispute a bitter conflict over the use of religious images earned him both enemies and uneasy allies. Tragically, his life was cut short in a manner as shocking as it was symbolic. On Christmas Day in the year 820, Leo was assassinated inside a church, the very sanctuary where he had sought solace and divine protection. The attack, orchestrated by a rival faction, unfolded during a solemn service, underscoring the brutal intersection of faith and power. His death plunged the empire into chaos as factions vied for control and the cycle of betrayal continued. These stories of Justinian and Leo reveal the Byzantine Empire as a place where piety and politics collided, often with fatal results. Their deaths, whether by plague, age, or the dagger of an assassin, reflect the complexities of a society grappling with profound questions of faith, governance, and survival. And as we leave the glittering yet perilous world of Byzantium behind, we turn our gaze to the vast steppes of Central Asia, where the life and death of Attila the Hun would leave an indelible mark on history, shaping the destiny of empires far beyond his own. Venturing now from the sacred sanctuaries of Byzantium to the untamed expanses of Central Asia, we encounter a figure whose name alone evokes both fear and fascination: Attila the Hun. Known as the Scourge of God, Attila carved out an empire that stretched across vast territories, striking terror into the hearts of Rome and beyond. Yet, for all his might and conquests, his death remains as mysterious as the man himself, wrapped in layers of speculation and intrigue. The story unfolds in the year 453, during what should have been a night of celebration. Attila had just taken a new bride, a young woman named Ildiko, and the wedding feast was said to have been a lavish affair, filled with revelry and excess. But the joy was short-lived. The next morning, Attila was found dead, his life extinguished under circumstances that have puzzled historians for centuries. Accounts from the time suggest he died in his sleep, but the exact cause remains unknown. Some propose that he succumbed to alcohol poisoning, his body overwhelmed by the sheer volume of drink consumed during the feast. Others point to the possibility of internal bleeding, perhaps triggered by a burst blood vessel, as evidence suggests he may have been in poor health leading up to the event. Adding to the mystery, ancient chroniclers tell a grisly tale about the aftermath of his death. According to legend, Ildiko was discovered weeping beside Attila's lifeless body, her veil soaked with blood, a detail that has fueled theories of foul play or even ritualistic practices surrounding his passing. While historians debate the veracity of these accounts, what is undeniable is the rapid decline of the Hunnic Empire following Attila's demise. Without a strong leader to unite them, the tribes that had once formed the backbone of his fearsome army splintered into factions, their power waning as quickly as it had risen. Attila's death also sent shockwaves across Europe, reshaping the political landscape in ways that reverberated for generations. The Huns' retreat created a power vacuum that allowed other groups, such as the Ostrogoths and Visigoths, to rise in prominence. For Rome, the immediate threat of Attila's invasions was lifted, though the empire itself would crumble within decades. His legacy, however, endured, not just as a warrior king, but as a symbol of raw, unbridled power and the fragility of even the mightiest empires. And so, as the tale of Attila the Hun draws to a close, we find ourselves reflecting on the fleeting nature of dominance and the profound impact one life and one death can have on history. From the steppes of Central Asia, we now journey to the heart of ancient China, where the deaths of two emperors reveal a different kind of power struggle, one driven by obsession, ambition, and the quest for immortality. As we leave behind the sweeping tales of conquest and chaos in the West, our journey now takes us to the ancient heart of China, where the quest for eternal life and the shadow of political betrayal shaped the fates of two of its most legendary rulers. Here, amidst the splendor of imperial courts and the weight of dynastic power, we uncover the stories of Qin Shi Huang and Emperor Taizong of Tang, whose deaths stand as cautionary tales of ambition and hubris. Qin Shi Huang, the man who united China and built the iconic Great Wall, was a ruler obsessed with one thing above all else: immortality. His relentless pursuit of eternal life led him to seek out alchemists and mystics who promised him elixirs capable of defying death. Tragically, these so-called miracle concoctions contained toxic substances, most notably mercury, which he consumed in alarming quantities. Modern historians believe that these elixirs, rather than granting him eternal life, instead poisoned his body over time. As his health deteriorated, the emperor became increasingly paranoid, isolating himself and relying on ever more elaborate schemes to protect his empire. In the end, the very potions he trusted to preserve his life may have hastened his demise, a cruel irony for a man who sought to conquer even the boundaries of mortality. Turning to Emperor Taizong of Tang, we encounter a different kind of tragedy, one steeped in political intrigue and whispered betrayals. Taizong, celebrated as one of China's greatest emperors, was a visionary leader who ushered in a golden age of prosperity and cultural achievement. Yet his final days were shrouded in suspicion and controversy. Ancient records suggest that Taizong's death may have been linked to poison, possibly administered by those closest to him. While the exact details remain unclear, the accusations point to a web of courtly conspiracies, where power struggles and personal vendettas threaten to unravel the stability of the empire. Whether the poison was intentional or accidental, Taizong's death serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked even within the highest echelons of power. These two rulers, though separated by centuries, share a common thread in their stories. Both were undone by the very forces they sought to control. For Qin Shi Huang, it was his obsession with immortality that ultimately sealed his fate, while for Taizong, it was the cutthroat world of imperial politics that may have claimed his life. Their deaths remind us that even the most powerful are not immune to the flaws of human ambition and the machinations of those around them. With their legacies etched into the annals of history, we now prepare to move westward once more, to uncover the mysterious illness that struck down King John of England during one of the most tumultuous periods in medieval history. As the sands of time shift our focus from the imperial courts of China, we now journey to the misty shores of medieval England, where one of history's most vilified kings met a fate as dramatic as his tumultuous reign. King John, often remembered as the monarch who signed the Magna Carta under duress, faced a final chapter filled with chaos, betrayal, and an enduring mystery surrounding his untimely demise. King John's death occurred in the autumn of the year 1216, during a grueling campaign against rebellious barons who had risen against his rule. By this point, his reputation was already in tatters, seen as greedy, untrustworthy, and prone to poor leadership. Yet, it was not the swords of his enemies that claimed him, but rather a mysterious illness that struck swiftly and mercilessly. The exact nature of this affliction has sparked centuries of debate among historians. Some argue that dysentery, a common and often fatal ailment in medieval times, was the culprit. This theory is supported by accounts of his symptoms, which included fever, exhaustion, and severe gastrointestinal distress. Others, however, point to darker possibilities, suggesting that poisoning may have played a role. Given the political turmoil of the era and the many enemies John had made, it's not far-fetched to imagine foul play at work. Was it a vengeful baron or an ambitious courtier seeking to hasten the end of an unpopular king? The truth remains buried in the mists of time. Adding to the drama of King John's final days is the infamous tale of the crown jewels. As his forces retreated across the treacherous tidal flats known as the Wash, a sudden and violent storm swept in, swallowing both men and treasure alike. The crown jewels, symbols of royal authority and power, were lost forever in the swirling waters. This catastrophic event has become one of the most legendary anecdotes of his reign, a fittingly chaotic end to a king whose rule was marked by instability and misfortune. Whether the jewels were truly lost to nature's fury or spirited away by opportunistic traitors is yet another layer of speculation that enriches the story of King John's downfall. His death left England in a precarious position as the kingdom was already fractured by civil strife. The loss of such a polarizing figure did little to quell the unrest, and the political landscape remained fragile in the years that followed. Yet, the mystery of his final illness and the dramatic loss of the crown jewels have ensured that King John's story continues to captivate historians and storytellers alike. With this tale of intrigue and calamity behind us, we turn our gaze eastward once more, toward the sweeping steppes of the Mongol Empire, where the fates of two legendary conquerors, Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, await our exploration. Their stories, steeped in conquest and legacy, promise to shed light on the enigmatic ends of these titans of history. As we leave behind the stormy shores of medieval England, our journey now sweeps across the vast and untamed steppes of the Mongol Empire, where the lives and deaths of two of history's most formidable conquerors continue to intrigue and mystify. These leaders, whose names echo through time, shaped empires and left legacies that still resonate today. Yet their final days were shrouded in mystery and shadow, much like the lands they once ruled. The story of Genghis Khan's death begins with a veil of secrecy so thick that even centuries later, scholars struggle to pierce it. The great Khan, who united the Mongol tribes and forged the largest contiguous empire in history, met his end in the year 1227. However, the exact circumstances of his passing remain a subject of debate. One widely circulated theory suggests that he succumbed to injuries sustained during a hunting accident. The idea of such a powerful figure undone by a fall or a stray arrow carries a certain poetic irony, though it raises as many questions as it answers. What truly happened during that fateful hunt? Was it an accident, or could it have been an act of betrayal? Adding to the intrigue is the mystery of his burial site. According to legend, Genghis Khan's body was laid to rest in an unmarked grave, its location known only to a handful of trusted individuals who were later executed to ensure eternal secrecy. To this day, the search for his tomb continues, fueling countless expeditions and stirring the imaginations of historians and adventurers alike. Turning our gaze to Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis, we find a ruler whose final years were marked by a very different kind of decline. By the time of his death in the year 1294, the Mongol Empire had already begun to fracture under the weight of its own vastness. Kublai, who had once ruled over a realm stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Europe, faced mounting challenges in his later years. His health, weakened by age and illness, mirrored the instability of his empire. Chronic ailments plagued him, and his once sharp mind grew clouded, leaving him unable to effectively manage the growing divisions within his court. the internal strife among his advisors and the rising power of rival factions further eroded the unity that had defined the empire's golden age. Kublai's death marked the beginning of the end for Mongol dominance as the empire splintered into smaller, often warring states. Yet despite this decline, his legacy endures. Kublai's vision of governance, blending Mongol traditions with elements of Chinese bureaucracy, left a lasting impact on the regions he ruled. Together, the stories of Genghis and Kublai Khan offer a fascinating glimpse into the rise and fall of empires. Their lives were defined by conquest and ambition, but their deaths remind us of the fragility of power and the inevitable passage of time. From the hidden grave of Genghis to the crumbling dynasty of Kublai, their mysteries continue to captivate us. And now, as we prepare to delve into the next chapter of our journey, we shift our focus to the courts of medieval England, where the controversial death of King Edward II awaits our exploration, promising yet another tale of intrigue and betrayal. As we turn the page from the grandeur and chaos of the Mongol Empire, our tale now narrows to the shadowy corridors of medieval England, where one of history's most shocking and debated royal deaths awaits. This is the story of King Edward II, a monarch whose controversial reign ended not with a whisper, but with a tale so gruesome it has echoed through the centuries. The official account of Edward's death tells of a horrifying execution where a red-hot poker was said to have been thrust into his body. A method as cruel as it was symbolic, this act was allegedly meant to punish him for his perceived weakness and moral failings, particularly his close relationships with favorites like Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despenser the Younger. These ties had alienated the English nobility, sparking rebellion and ultimately leading to Edward's forced abdication in favor of his son, Edward III. But why such a barbaric method of execution? Some historians suggest it was a calculated message, a way to humiliate the king posthumously and warn others against defying the authority of the crown and the will of the powerful barons. Yet, not everyone accepts this chilling narrative. Alternative theories propose that Edward may have escaped his captors entirely. Evidence for this comes from historical accounts that describe a man resembling the king living in exile on the continent years after his supposed death. Supporters of this theory point to the lack of concrete proof of the execution, as well as the political expediency of letting a deposed king vanish quietly rather than risk martyrdom or rebellion in his name. If true, this would mean Edward lived out his days far from the throne, perhaps finding a strange kind of peace away from the treachery and power struggles that defined his reign. Edward's downfall reshaped the English monarchy in profound ways, setting a precedent for the limits of royal authority and the growing influence of the nobility. His abdication marked one of the first times a king was forcibly removed from power, signaling a shift in the balance between the crown and its subjects. It also paved the way for the rise of Edward III, a king whose reign would be marked by both military triumph and the enduring legacy of his father's tragic end. As we leave behind the shadow of Edward II, we now shift our gaze to the courts of France, where the mysterious deaths of two monarchs reveal the fragile interplay of health, power, and ambition. Their stories, much like Edward's, remind us that even those seated on the highest thrones are never truly beyond the reach of fate. Venturing now into the heart of medieval France, we encounter two monarchs whose deaths illuminate the intricate dance between health, power, and ambition. Their stories are not just tales of tragedy, but also windows into the challenges that shaped their era. Let us begin with Louis VII, a king whose final days were shadowed by illness and whose legacy left a lasting mark on one of history's most ambitious endeavors, the Crusades. Louis VII fell ill during the latter years of his reign, a condition that not only weakened his body but also his ability to lead. This illness struck at a critical time as Europe was embroiled in the fervor of the Crusades. Louis himself had once been at the forefront of this holy mission, leading the Second Crusade with a zeal that ultimately ended in failure. His decline in health years later raised questions about how different the outcome might have been had he remained strong and decisive. Some historians speculate that his inability to lead effectively in his final years may have contributed to the eventual unraveling of the Crusader states. His death marked not just the end of a reign, but also a turning point in the struggle for control in the Holy Land. Shifting our focus to Charles VI, we find a ruler whose life was defined by a torment far beyond the control of any kingdom: mental illness. Known to history as Charles the Mad, his erratic behavior and bouts of insanity cast a shadow over his reign. Modern interpretations suggest he may have suffered from conditions such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, though the exact nature of his illness remains a mystery. What is clear, however, is that his condition created a power vacuum that plunged France into turmoil. Factions within the royal court vied for control, manipulating the king's frailty to serve their own ambitions. By the time of his death, France was a fractured kingdom, its people weary from years of internal strife and external threats. Yet even in his final moments, Charles remained a symbol of the fragility of monarchy, a reminder that even the strongest thrones can wobble under the weight of human frailty. These two monarchs, though separated by centuries, share a common thread in their stories. Each faced personal battles that shaped not only their deaths but also the course of their kingdoms. Their lives serve as a testament to the unpredictable nature of power and the ways in which fate can intervene, even for those seated on the highest thrones. And with their stories etched into the annals of history, we turn our gaze to the next chapter, a land where legends of darkness and bloodshed would give rise to one of history's most infamous figures, Vlad the Impaler. His story, like those before it, reminds us that history is often written in blood as much as in ink. As we journey deeper into the shadows of history, we arrive at a figure whose name alone evokes images of terror and intrigue: Vlad the Impaler. Known for his brutal tactics and unyielding resolve, Vlad III's life was as dramatic as his death was shrouded in mystery. What truly happened to this infamous ruler, and how did his story give rise to one of literature's most enduring legends? Let us unravel the enigma of Vlad's final days. Vlad III, also known as Vlad Dracula, spent much of his reign defending Wallachia against the encroaching Ottoman Empire. His reputation for cruelty, particularly his use of impalement as a method of execution, earned him both fear and respect. Yet, despite his ferocity, Vlad's life came to an abrupt and mysterious end in the year 1476. Historical accounts vary wildly when it comes to his death. Some suggest he was assassinated by his own men, who turned against him during a campaign. Others propose he fell victim to an ambush by Ottoman forces. What is certain is that his body disappeared shortly after, leaving behind only fragments of evidence and an enduring sense of uncertainty. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Vlad's death lies in the fate of his head. According to legend, after his demise, his head was severed from his body and sent to the Ottoman Sultan as a trophy. The Sultan reportedly had it displayed on a stake outside his palace, a grim testament to the Sultan's victory over the man who had once terrorized his armies. Meanwhile, Vlad's body was said to have been buried in an unmarked grave, its location lost to time. This macabre twist only deepened the mystery surrounding his final moments. Adding to the intrigue is how Vlad's legacy transcended his death to inspire one of history's most iconic fictional characters, Count Dracula. Though Bram Stoker's famous vampire bears little resemblance to the historical Vlad, the connection between the two has captivated audiences for generations. Stoker drew inspiration from Vlad's nickname, Dracula, which means son of the dragon, a title derived from his father's membership in the Order of the Dragon. However, it was Vlad's reputation for cruelty and his association with bloodshed that truly fueled the dark mythos surrounding Dracula. In death, Vlad III became more than a medieval ruler. He became a symbol of horror, his story blending fact and fiction into a tale that continues to haunt the imagination. The mystery of Vlad the Impaler's death serves as a stark reminder of how history and legend intertwine, shaping how we remember those who once held power. From the brutal battlefields of Wallachia to the pages of Gothic literature, Vlad's story is one of darkness, defiance, and the enduring allure of the unknown. And yet, the shadows of history hold more tales of intrigue, including the rise and fall of great empires in distant lands. Next, we turn our attention to India, where the legacies of Ashoka and Aurangzeb reveal the complexities of leadership and the weight of ambition in shaping the destiny of nations. Stepping into the vast and intricate history of India, we encounter two rulers whose legacies are as contrasting as they are profound. The tales of Ashoka and Aurangzeb take us on a journey through the heights of enlightenment and the depths of imperial decline. Their deaths, like their lives, leave us with lingering questions and lessons that span centuries. Ashoka the Great, one of India's most revered emperors, is remembered not for his conquests but for his transformation into a beacon of peace and compassion. After the devastating Kalinga War, where hundreds of thousands perished, Ashoka embraced Buddhism and devoted his reign to spreading its teachings. Yet, when it comes to the details of his death, history falls strangely silent. There are no definitive records of his final days, a surprising gap considering his monumental impact. Some scholars suggest that Ashoka met a peaceful end, passing away quietly after years of promoting nonviolence and moral governance. Others believe his death might have been obscured by political turmoil following his reign. Whatever the truth, Ashoka's legacy endures as a testament to the power of redemption and the enduring influence of ideas over brute force. Turning our gaze to a later era, we find Aurangzeb, the last of the great Mughal emperors, whose rule marked both the zenith and the beginning of the end for the Mughal Empire. Unlike Ashoka, Aurangzeb's reign was defined by military campaigns and a strict interpretation of Islamic law. Yet, even a ruler as formidable as Aurangzeb could not escape the passage of time or the toll of his unyielding ambitions. Historical accounts reveal that Aurangzeb spent his final years grappling with a prolonged illness, his once mighty empire beginning to fracture under the weight of his policies. As his health declined, so too did the stability of the empire he sought to expand. By the time of his death in 1707, the Mughal Empire was already showing signs of decay, burdened by internal strife and external pressures. Aurangzeb's story serves as a sobering reminder of how even the most powerful rulers are bound by the limits of their humanity and the consequences of their choices. The stark contrast between Ashoka's legacy of peace and Aurangzeb's iron grip on an empire underscores the complexities of leadership. While Ashoka's death remains a quiet mystery wrapped in the ideals he championed, Aurangzeb's demise symbolizes the fragility of even the mightiest kingdoms. Together, these rulers offer a compelling glimpse into the triumphs and trials of those who once shaped the destiny of India. And as we reflect on their stories, we prepare to journey further into the annals of history, where the fate of King Richard III awaits to reveal its own dark secrets. As we leave behind the towering legacies of Ashoka and Aurangzeb, our journey takes a sharp turn into the shadowy world of medieval England, where the story of King Richard III lies waiting to be unearthed literally. For centuries, his name was synonymous with villainy, a product of Shakespeare's quill and Tudor propaganda. But in 2011, a remarkable discovery beneath a parking lot in Leicester rewrote parts of his story, pulling him from the shadows of infamy and into the light of historical scrutiny. The skeleton found in that unassuming grave revealed startling details about Richard's life and death. Most striking was the pronounced curvature of his spine, a condition known as scoliosis. This physical trait had long been exaggerated in art and literature to paint him as a hunchbacked tyrant. But the evidence showed that while Richard lived with this condition, it did not define him. He was a warrior king, actively leading his troops on the battlefield, as the trauma to his remains so vividly illustrates. The fatal injury, a devastating blow to the back of his skull, confirmed the brutal reality of his final moments at Bosworth Field. This was no distant commander. Richard fought fiercely, likely unhorsed and surrounded until the end. What makes this discovery even more compelling is how it reshaped his historical reputation. For generations, Richard was vilified as the man who murdered his nephews, the princes in the Tower, to secure his crown. Yet modern historians have revisited the evidence, questioning whether this narrative was more fiction than fact. The physical proof of his scoliosis, combined with his steadfastness in battle, paints a more nuanced portrait of a ruler who faced immense challenges both on and off the field. It's a reminder that history is often written by the victors, and Richard's legacy may have been shaped more by Henry Tudor's triumph than by his own actions. As we step away from the skeletal remains of Richard III, we find ourselves reflecting not only on his tragic end, but also on the fragile nature of how history remembers its figures. And now, as we turn our gaze across the Atlantic to the Americas, we prepare to uncover the tumultuous final days of Moctezuma II, an emperor caught between his own people and the relentless tide of Spanish conquest. As the echoes of Richard III's battlefield courage fade into history, we now shift our gaze to a tale of clashing worlds, where empires collided and a ruler's fate became a symbol of an era's end. Moctezuma II, the Aztec emperor whose name resonates through time, found himself ensnared in the tumultuous crossfire between his people and the Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés. His death remains one of the most debated mysteries in history, a moment that not only sealed his own tragic fate, but also marked a turning point for an entire civilization. To understand Moctezuma's demise, we must first step into the world of the Aztecs, a society rich in culture, ritual, and power. Moctezuma was not just a ruler, he was seen as a divine intermediary between the gods and his people. But when Hernán Cortés arrived on the shores of what is now Mexico in 1519, the delicate balance of Moctezuma's authority began to unravel. Initially, Moctezuma welcomed the Spanish, believing them to be emissaries of the god Quetzalcoatl, whose return was prophesied. This decision would prove to be both his greatest miscalculation and his undoing. Theories surrounding Moctezuma's death are as varied as they are dramatic. Some accounts suggest that he was killed by his own people, who had grown disillusioned with his leadership. To them, Moctezuma's willingness to negotiate with the Spanish and his perceived subservience to Cortés made him a traitor. In the heat of the infamous La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows, when the Spanish were driven out of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, Moctezuma allegedly addressed his people in a desperate attempt to quell the uprising. Instead, he was met with a hail of stones and spears, dying at the hands of those he once ruled. On the other hand, there are accounts that place the blame squarely on the Spanish. According to this version of events, Moctezuma was executed by Cortés or his men during their retreat from the city. This theory aligns with the notion that the Spanish, seeing Moctezuma as more of a liability than an asset, disposed of him when he was no longer useful. Whether it was a calculated execution or an act of revenge, the result was the same. The emperor's death left a power vacuum that would hasten the fall of the Aztec Empire. The symbolic weight of Moctezuma's death cannot be overstated. It represents more than just the loss of a leader. It marks the collision of two vastly different worlds and the beginning of the end for the Aztec civilization. His tragic end embodies the struggle between tradition and conquest, between the divine rule of an emperor and the brutal pragmatism of colonial invaders. To this day, Moctezuma's story evokes questions about loyalty, betrayal, and the fragile nature of power in the face of overwhelming odds. As we reflect on the life and death of Moctezuma II, we are reminded of how history often turns on moments of profound uncertainty and conflict. His legacy is not just one of tragedy but also of resilience, a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who refused to surrender their identity without a fight. And now, as we bring this exploration of mysterious deaths to a close, we will take a moment to tie together the threads of these stories that reveal the complexities of power, the inevitability of mortality, and the enduring allure of the unknown. Stay with us as we summarize these captivating tales and invite you to share which mystery resonates most with you. As we draw the curtains on this journey through the shadows of history, it becomes clear that the lives and deaths of these ancient rulers were anything but ordinary. From the sands of Egypt to the heart of the Aztec Empire, these stories are bound together by threads of intrigue, betrayal, and the haunting uncertainty of fate. Whether it was the sudden demise of a pharaoh, the whispered conspiracies against a Persian king, or the dramatic fall of an emperor caught between two worlds, these tales remind us that power, no matter how absolute, is always fragile. The echoes of their legacies challenge us to consider the delicate balance of leadership, the inevitability of mortality, and the enduring allure of the unknown. Which of these mysteries leaves you most captivated? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue unraveling history's greatest enigmas together. If you're eager for more journeys into the past, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the mysterious deaths that shaped the course of history. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep uncovering the secrets of the past.